Good afternoon. Hello. I'm John. I'm with Chef. How are you? How's the show going? All right. Woo! Go Ben. All right. So today's discussion is with me, my colleague Mike Dodge from Facebook, and Ryan Moon from Slack. And what we're going to talk to you about today are all the interesting challenges and insights on how you can manage and tame your MacBook fleet with Chef. Mike's going to start us off.
Cool. Hey, everyone. So yeah, my portion is, well, all of us really, is managing the unmanageable. My name is Mike Dodge. I work at Facebook, obviously, and I'm on the client platform engineering team. So when you think about the client-server relationship, my team manages all the client devices at Facebook. So think laptops, desktops, mobile phones, that sort of thing. So now this whole week, we've heard great talks about how hard it could be to manage servers at scale. And sure, I get it. Servers at scale can be tough. But you know, I think for the majority, it's easy. Clients is where it gets really challenging. I mean, just look at all those servers. They look so pretty, nice, in their row, all configured exactly the same, all very well behaved. You'll never see one of those go missing, right? And you certainly won't ever see any of them ever show up at your local coffee's Wi-Fi network.
We'll call you from Japan and say something bad happened. Right.
We'll get to that. And speaking of networks, they'll never be on a shitty Wi-Fi, and you'll never have to be on a conference Wi-Fi. Servers just usually have solid connections. And they will never start a download or an install in San Francisco and then try to complete it in Singapore. Just not a thing. And then, of course, there's the users. They're the worst. You know, joking aside, my coworkers are awesome, but seriously, they find creative ways to break something new every day, including poop. Yes, poop. We had a creative user that decided to change their host name to the poop emoji. You would not believe how many different things that broke. And I'm sure none of you guys have walked in and found your servers renamed to an emoji. That's just not, that doesn't happen. And of course, there's the physical attacks. You don't have to worry about your servers getting stolen. Or at least if you do, what are you doing here? Why aren't you guarding your servers? Okay. And all of those things are tough, and there's a whole list of other challenges when it comes to managing clients. But I could spend all day on that, and those are challenging things, but then it comes to my environment. Facebook is a fast-paced company and was founded on principles like move fast, be bold, and a hacker culture. Like, we literally have the word hack cemented into our courtyard. So our engineers are used to working around and through problems. So I know what you're thinking. I've heard, people talk about this before. All you have to do is the carrot and stick method, and that would work, except my users don't look at it that way. They look at it more as a mousetrap. And remember, my users aren't the regular users. A lot of them are very technical and very smart engineers. So it's more like this. And when your management tools become blockers, especially in an environment like mine, if they're perceived as a blocker, you're starting from a losing position. It's not going to work. So we tried a whole bunch of clever ways of getting our machines to automatically re-enroll. If an engineer removes some of our tools, we'd even give them a breathing period of about a week before some of our automation would reinstall it, just long enough for them to forget why they uninstalled it in the first place. But ultimately, what we found that worked the best was actually creating some transparency into our tooling and building a partnership with some of the people that were critical of some of our configuration management practices. So by opening up our code and putting our chef configs right next to theirs, it really helped build that partnership. So yeah, my team, CPE, loves Chef. It really comes with the flexibility that we needed to allow others to contribute to our configuration. So I'm going to go into an example and of our run list, and it really is an over simplification, but you'll kind of get the picture, and we can dig into more of it later during the Q&A. But this is what our run list looks like. It starts with some API cookbooks. And if you really want to dig into how API cookbooks work, there's going to be some links at the end. But at Facebook, Phil Dibowitz and his team really pioneered the concept. And really, it's basically where a custom resource, instead of taking properties to change how it interacts with the system, it consumes parts of Node and allows multiple people within multiple different cookbooks to write to that namespace and ultimately take the last write to win. So we're going to go over and walk through an example of that in a minute. So here we have a CPE screensaver cookbook, which will manage, obviously, the laptop screensaver, and then Monkey, which is a GUI application patch management tool for OS X. Yeah, we'll get into that. Okay. So then in the next portion of our run list is our base settings. This is just kind of where we set global settings for the whole company. Then we look at in addition to the node object, we build a person object. And that person object will have attributes about the person who's logged into the machine. So in this case, we are trying to do an include recipe of the person's department. And then at that level, we can set sales settings or engineering settings and stuff like that. And then this is where it gets really helpful for a lot of other engineers and more technical folks. They can actually, we'll include any recipes that we find of the current user who's logged into the machine under the user customizations cookbook, so they can change any of their settings that they'd like there, and then the node name as well. So they put in their node name in that cookbook, and we'll pick up those changes along the way too. So yeah, there you have it. Huge oversimplification of our run list, but now you kind of get it. So now we're going to jump into a very specific example. So in our base settings, we'll see something like this, where we set the screensaver to 600 or 10 minutes, and then there's a password when your screensaver comes up. What's the delay? It's 1 second. Then in Monkey, for the managed installs and what applications Monkey should care about, we're telling, Chef is telling it all the machines need to have Firefox. Cool. So that's our base settings. Then this is kind of where some of the magic starts to happen. Inside of the CPE departments cookbook, we'll have the multiple departments listed. So in this particular case, let's say person department returns sales, you would get this. So for sales, I don't know why, let's just pretend we only give them 300 seconds for their screensaver timeout, and they also get Excel in addition to Firefox because, you know, numbers and stuff, sales. So, but for engineering, we can do something completely different, set up their dev environment or do any of those things. But in this particular example, we give them a little bit more time because, I don't know, compiling. And they also get iTerm2 in addition to Firefox. So there you have it. There's some like department overrides to what is in the base settings for anyone, conditionally based on who's logged in and what their department is. So now this is what I was telling you is the cool part. This is the part that gets me excited. So the base settings are good. I'm an engineer. Sure, some of those settings are good, but I get to expand it or override it to whatever I want. In this case, I'm very security conscious, so my screensaver will go off after a minute. No password delay for me. But this is another cool part. On all of my machines, as soon as I log in, Quip, Dropbox, iTerm2, Mosh, and VLC will automatically be installed. And then, I just installed Mosh, so I'm going to put it in my default path as well. But the reason why this is really cool is I could literally throw this laptop away, get a new one, log in for the first time, and have it automatically bring back my configs for me. Cool. And then we didn't go into it, but we allow other teams or development teams to build their specs for the people that are on their teams. meaning that I have to do less work and they get to do it on my behalf, and I'm just responsible for the core framework that they use. So that was my customer resource, but again, Nate, a coworker of mine, can do whatever he wants, changing his to 300 and deleting Firefox because he's a Chrome guy. And then, additionally, he can create and include any resources that he'd like into his run list. So there you have it. That's kind of the overview of how our run lists work and how our API model works. Our goal is to open source 100% of our cookbooks. Facebook, the prod space, not CPE, has a lot of their cookbooks open sourced, and you can check them out there. CPE has ours, and we're constantly adding more and making improvements. But also there's quite a big community now. Pinterest and a few others are also contributing to ours and their own. So if you kind of search for the CPE namespace for cookbooks, you'll find plenty of them. And then...
Okay, so that's a great introduction on how you can customize the cookbooks.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to segue now into like, how do you get from, that's great, I can customize cookbooks for my users, how do I actually get there, right? What are you going to do to get the laptops ready, and what does it really mean to say I'm going to be managing the laptops with Chef?
So, and while John sets up, he did a lot of this recently, and we worked together on some of this. He's gonna. Yep. Are you ready?
There we go. All right. Let's see how this works. Let's see how this working. So, all right, great. Hey, I'm John. I'm the IT guy at Chef, and Eric's back there somewhere. He's the other IT guy. Say hi, Eric. So I'm just going to give you a little insight into our internal movement to Chef or to managing the laptops with Chef. So way back when, like everybody else, we're like, the laptops aren't well managed, and so we're thinking like, what are we going to do, right? I got to find something here. There's only two of us. We have lots of things we have to do on a daily basis, and we manage Windows, Mac, and Linux desktops or laptops, and Windows and Linux servers on the IT team. We also found that the number of things we wanted to use to manage the laptops weren't quite as robust. So initially, we started off with using Jamf. Like, Jamf's a great tool, right? How many people use Jamf, right? Some of you? Yeah, it works pretty well. The only challenge we had with using Jamf, though, was that we found that by installing profiles to lock down certain settings on the laptops, that Jamf would lock out whole sections of the UI, and almost immediately that became non-usable. So then what we fell back to was using bash scripts in Jamf to lock out settings and set preferences and things like that. But what happened is last year we met up with Mike again, and micro MDM became available. So everybody familiar with what an MDM is? So no? Okay, great. So the whole idea behind an MDM is your laptop boots up the first time, and it goes, I want to do something. So it goes, the Macintoshes specifically, they check in, they go, hey, I'm being managed. And the MDM says, I have you as a managed node. I'm going to feed you stuff, all right? We're going to talk about this in a second. I'll show you. It's pretty cool. All right. So in order to be successful, we thought about managing our laptop fleet. There's some things we wanted to make sure we had under control, one of which was like very fine-grained control. So I could turn on the screensaver and set it to 20 minutes, but not lock out the rest of the UI, for example. We wanted to be able to cover Windows and OS X and Linux desktops or laptops, right? We wanted to be able to have the whole thing be cost-effective and free, or free preferably, and then the management process should be relatively quick to handle, right? So if I give you a new laptop, I can't have a process doing things to your laptop where you're staring at it for half an hour or 2 hours, right? So whatever I'm going to do to the laptop, it has to be fairly fast. All right, so to manage your laptops then, there's 6 components here. There's Chef, obviously, the Chef client, which you're going to put on your laptop. There's a Chef server someplace that manages the cookbooks. There's the micro MDM, which is a specific deployment manager that we've deployed. It's an open source tool. You can download it for free. There's DEP Notify, which is a dialog you throw up on the screen that says, hey, I'm doing some stuff to your laptop, and it's 25% done, and it'll be done in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. there's an install applications tool that you can use to hijack the bootstrap process and inject things into onto the desktop of the laptop you're trying to manage. And then there's Monkey for putting up patch management or app management, and Encrypt Server to capture file vault keys. So at some point you have file vault encryption turned on. How do you get back on the laptop if the user leaves, right? So you use Crypt Server to capture that, and then you can unlock the laptop remotely if you have to. All right, so let's take a look at a little bit more detail on this. So a second ago I was describing the boot process. So your Macintosh boots up the first time, or the time after you wipe the operating system and put a new one down. It boots up and it calls into Apple. Apple says, yeah, you're being managed, right? And it redirects you to the MDM server. The MDM server then starts this process of bootstrapping and managing the app, managing the whole install process. So you see at the top there it says account configuration, and at the bottom it says device configured. That whole block of 4 steps there, or 4 clearly defined steps that Apple calls out, that is the point. The top of that box is when the user first gets, I need to know what kind of language you want to use. And the bottom of that box is when they're actually on the desktop for the first time. Okay, so there's 4 stages in there you can do something with to capture the laptop and do something with it. So the install application process then allows you to inject binaries onto the desktop. In this case, DEP Notify, a Chef client, and a couple other things. And it bootstraps Chef so that when they get to the desktop, they already have something that says, hey, I'm doing some interesting stuff here for you now. And then off you go. All right, so then to get started on this process, then you want to take a look at the terrific cookbooks that Facebook has put up for everyone to use, and then go take a look at all the other tools. I'm working on a blog for this, so shortly I'll publish out a blog you can go to, and it's a step-by-step, so if you want to go play around with this and give it a go, I'd love to get your feedback on it. So the whole goal of all these things we're talking about today is I want to be able to hand you, the new employee, that shrink-wrap laptop on the first day you walk in the office, right? You touch none of it. You pull the shrink-wrap off it, you power it on for the first time, and it just does the right thing, right? That's what we're going for here, is that all applications are installed, settings are made, and it just works. All right.
Thank you. So, how is everybody doing? I'm someone who's going to be presenting next. Let me just power on my computer.
Ms. Ryan, you're going to tell us about using InSpec to manage the cookbooks.
And if you guys are thinking of any questions, remember them. We'll have a Q&A after.
Maybe. All right, there we go.
There we go. Okay. That's a picture of a lemur. Let's pull this in so that it actually presents. Okay, get really
Lemur chicken dinner.
I just wanted to show you how excited I am to be here, and I hope everyone else has a moment in their life when they're as excited as this lemur is. I don't know what he's eating, but it's bringing him a lot of joy. So I feel the same way about configuration management on endpoints. I mean, most of the time I'm looking like that, but a little bit about me. So I'm Ryan Moon. I work at Slack as a client platform engineer. I don't know this tiger professionally or personally, but he definitely seems to be owning winter. And I grew up in the Midwest. I've been living on the West Coast for a long time, and I kind of miss winter, but I've never enjoyed winter as much as that tiger is enjoying things. I mean, he may have decapitated one of the snowmen. I don't know. I'm on Twitter, at Ryan Moon, where I mainly tweet about a sandwich that I just ate, or I complain about how the ferry has broken down once again, and I contemplate buying a jet ski to ferry into San Francisco. It never works out well, my research. I'm on the Mac admin Slack, which I want to mention is a really great resource that my boss is actually one of the people who started it. But it's a really great place for any type of Mac administration. Should definitely look it up and join it. And then I'm also on the Chef Community Slack, and my handle there is @Moon. And if there's anybody who works at Slack here, you can find me, but I'm also @Moon, just on the Slack one. So I want to talk about InSpec and how I'm using InSpec over at Slack to do a couple different things. So backing up a little bit, I started at Slack back in October with the express goal of switching our whole fleet to being, our whole endpoint fleet to being managed with Chef. So we have some Linux clients, we have some Windows clients. The vast majority of them are Mac clients. And I was like, great, I can do that. Who couldn't do that? So I started down this process, and I realized, oh, hey, I have to switch from one management system to another management system. I've got a great idea. Let's give everyone a new laptop. That didn't work very well. I tried to make it but there's so much more value, and we're just replacing laptops all the time anyways. Everyone wants a new laptop after 2 years. We just bumped that up. Unfortunately, they didn't feel good about buying 1,200 new laptops. So, of course, now I got to bootstrap machines while they're moving. So I'm changing tires while the car is going on. It's a lot like the scene from the movie Giant Dangerously when they're pulling the stuff off the car and the police guy's like, it's now, a plaid station wagon. Those kinds of things. But so the approach I made to this was like, okay, I'm going to write a whole bunch of chef cookbooks to manage an endpoint. And the big thing is I don't want to break anybody's stuff. So I'm going to go write a bunch of tests. So I wrote a bunch of unit tests. I wrote a bunch of, integration tests. And I used InSpec to do that. So one could say at this point, I have a plethora of tests. Now, one of my secret professional goals is to be loved. Kind of like Norm in Cheers. When I walk into the office, I kind of want a thing like that. So I figure if I don't break anyone's laptop, I can almost reach Norm status. Also, my second secret professional goal is to be thought of as a professional. So I wrote tests. So now I have a ton of tests, and really I'm just using these to prove that Chef is going to do what it's going to do. Is there anything else I can use these for? So one of the things that I kind of jumped on right when I started was, hey, everyone who gets a new laptop, they should start off just with Chef. And I'm like, I can run a series of InSpec tests and just say, hey, Chef ran. But at Slack, we have this whole concept where there are still some things that we do in a manual process. I mean, I'd love to automate everything, but I'm just one person and I like to eat sandwiches, so we're not quite there. So there is a bit of manual touch there. And I was like, well, hey, I can use InSpec to write a test to see if someone did the thing that they were supposed to do manually. So we have kind of a sanity check before we hand this machine to somebody and they're off and going. It's things like setting up their SSH keys and making sure that they're password protected, and then that password is in 1Password. Those kind of things that, in theory, I could write a whole bunch of Chef stuff to do that, but I don't think 1Password is going to allow me to leverage into a private API to do those types of things. I've tried. It's not easy. So I want to show you some pictures of what this looks like. So one of the tools, I know, pictures, everyone's really excited. So one of the tools we also use at Slack is a beautiful tool called Monkey, and it was open sourced by the wonderful people at Walt Disney. They may own the copyright on the concept of Monkey for several generations' lifetimes. I'm not really quite certain, but it's a really great tool for installing applications, and there's a really nice GUI to it. And as much as I love to tell everybody who works in IT, just use the terminal. Sometimes I don't want to teach people how to do that and then explain, well, no, you just pipe it into grep and it's great. And they're like, what? So I'm like, hey, let's make it a one-click thing. So I did that. So I wrote this thing called Monkey Setup Check, and what's known as an on-demand item in Monkey. So a couple, characteristics have to be met. One, they have to be running as our admin user, not actually the user that the person would run, because as much I would like for end users to be running their setup check on their machine and then piping into the Slack channel all day long, and I'd be like, hey, I can give you a cookie, you keep clicking a button. I didn't want that to happen. So I put this in there, and the whole end goal would be like, hey, right before you hand this machine to somebody else, I should back up a bit. There are two last things that everyone needs to do when they're setting up a machine. One, they need to run setup check, and it needs to pass. And a passing score enables you to the next level. So everyone loves video games. Everyone wants to get to the next level, fight the evil boss, kind of thing like that. So let me show you what a failure looks like. So I junked this up. So Basically what this does is this runs an InSpec test, and then I pipe this into Slack with the beautiful webhook. Eventually I'll make it into an application, and it'll be the most amazing Slack application ever, but today is not that day. But I just did a demo example, and you're wondering yourself, fire sauce, how is that a failure? Well, if someone gave you a taco and you asked for mild sauce and they put fire sauce on that, you would not have a happy taco experience. So I went with that. So we have 14 successful tests, 22 failures, but there was success. This is also a good example of what happens when you write tests to test things at a root level but don't run InSpec as root. So I kind of cheated on this example, I'm not going to lie. So let's show you a success. Hey, it's a test pattern from a television. If you have any type of video background, if you can see a good test pattern, you have a good video signal, and that's a very good thing. So today we have 36 successful tests, 0 failures, and 0 skipped. Now, I've written some logic into the InSpec tests to where if it's an engineering laptop, it'll have Xcode installed. If they have Xcode installed, we're going to generate SSH keys for them and different things like that. So this machine that I ran this test on was an engineering machine, had those particular components to it. But if it happens to be someone in sales, you'll see that a couple tests have been skipped because I've run a conditional where if Xcode's not installed, we're not doing anything additional testing for like SSH keys and things like that. So more talking. So I'm also going to be giving another talk in 2 weeks at the Mac DevOps in Vancouver. I hear Vancouver's nice. Does anyone have anything to say against Vancouver?
Lovely city. Lovely city.
There we go. So 2 for 2. We get into the Hall of Fame. So I'm going to give a talk there on just all the approaches to testing I do, particularly at Slack. And the last thing I want to say is thanks. And I want to say thanks to you for sitting there and listening. And most of you paid attention, so I felt really good about that. No one's faces really glowed up. Glowed up from their phone, by more something like that. I also want to thank the awesome Slack core IT team, the people that I work with. If any of you are wondering where I was this week, I'm in Chicago giving a talk. And yeah, that's it. I want to also thank both John and Mike for doing some really great things with client platform engineering and endpoint management. I think it's really exciting that there's a whole bunch of different ideas on doing it, and it's actually really fun. I've been doing Chef stuff since about 2013. And before it was just a lot of templates. I was really good at templates. I'm still really good at templates and ERBs. But there's a lot of really nice resources that people have written, and a resource is really just a fancy wrapper around a template anyways. So at this point, I would like to open it up to see if anybody has any questions, and then maybe we might have answers.
This is a really exciting topic, and I can definitely see using something like Chef for initial configuration, rollout of a new device. Are you guys also using Chef or InSpec for ongoing compliance checks on endpoints?
Yeah, so the question being that, are we using Chef for ongoing compliance and InSpec stuff like that? I can speak for myself. At Slack, we are. I have a really fun audit coming up in August, which will just cap off a summer of fun. So one of my plans is to really leverage as much InSpec as I can to do the work of proving that, I'm a bit of a, I guess my whole thing is like, no, Chef ran. If Chef ran, it did the things that I told it to do, and trust me, I did all the security stuff. But I want to show the auditors the tests that we can say, like, yes, directory X exists. Yes, application Y is installed, different things like that. So that's really a big thing on my plate to do kind of moving forward at Slack.
So at Facebook, we have not looked at InSpec, but we have a very similar thought behind how Chef works. Like if it converged and it was successful, then we know everything was done correctly. But on top of just that, we've written custom report handlers that actually report all the facts that we do care about a given laptop, and then it hits some of our own internal data tools, and then we can be like, aha, everything's encrypted, or Bob, why aren't you encrypted? That sort of thing.
And at Chef, we went a different direction. We're using compliance, and we have, we're I guess since they announced Automate 2.0, we were the first internal customer, and I have compliance profiles, and so I can verify the last time the compliance profile came up every 30 minutes that the laptops are in compliance for screensaver, password, complexity, all that kind of good stuff. We have like six 6 tasks, 6 checks in our compliance profile. So you can audit with a high degree of confidence that the laptops or the devices are in compliance.
So, and to play off of something you said about are we running Chef all the time? Yes, and I really would encourage everyone to do that on your client devices. A great example is a recent 0 day that was I am Groot, which is I am root, which is basically where any user could basically attempt to log in as root and it'll let them through. So Apple took about 72 hours to release a fix, but internally, and I know many other Mac admins were able to push a fix out like almost immediately. I think we had ours out to 100% of our fleet within hours, like 2 hours.
Yeah, we have our laptops set to pull every 30 minutes, and so the way that the whole thing runs is that there's at least 2 checks right now. That the laptop will start a Chef run at a minimum when you reboot or when you log in, and then at a maximum about every 30 minutes, depending on how you set the timeout on the cookbook to run.
Mike, you mentioned allowing users to make customizations and whatnot to their machines. How are you managing those custom recipes, I guess? Are they being checked into repo by the user? And if so, a lot of our developers like to check in or back up their bash profile, and there's sometimes secrets and things that are kept in there. So how are you preventing sanitizing those, I guess?
So as it is set up today, anyone can check in to... Oh, sorry, yeah, repeat the question. Thank you. Question, how do we manage people contributing to Chef, and how do our developers get changes into Chef? So it's very similar throughout the rest of the company. We use something called Fabricator and Git or Mercurial, depending, and they can just check in recipes. The way Fabricator works in our environment is they just need one other engineer to approve it, but we have a whole bunch of linters and rules such that if some engineer decided, they wanted to do something unsecure, like, hey, I'm storing my SSH key or something like that in Git, once we recognize that as like a regex pattern that we would see, my security team would actually be involved on the diff. They would actually see the person trying to check in this diff and just be like, no, you're not. Like, not going to happen. For the most part, it also really gives us the ability to allow for exceptions, because if we have a user that really does need their screensaver to be outside what we would consider compliance, when they do actually check in that diff, it's usually done with a reason. I need to do this thing, and I will turn it back on tomorrow, I promise. But we're not seen as a blocker, and I'd much rather them check in that diff and do it that way instead of circumventing and removing or disabling my tools.
One comment, this gentleman back here asked me a second ago about compliance profiles and are they public? And I think generally speaking, there's a ginormous list already available of public compliance profiles that test for CVE XYZ from Linux 1604 or something. So yes, like there's all kinds of options for you there too.
So you mentioned about the InSpec for auditing purpose, right? So if I talk about my audit experience, so it's not only just showing the InSpec checks like it's right, wrong, or something, but they may ask to prove using some documentation processes or ServiceNow or other processes. So along with InSpec checks, what are the other things like you're gonna prove to make that audit successful?
Okay, so the question is in terms of auditing, on top of the InSpec tests, what are we trying to prove? Well, there's the InSpec tests, which are really just kind of describing all the various things that we're asking Chef to do. So to give you an example, one of the things that we get audited on, so screensaver time, and that the screensaver is set to be locked, and that we have a specific timeout and things like that. So the general approach to that I'm taking is, so I have this pretty decent, so on all the key audit points, those are my biggest InSpec tests. On the last ones, it's just like, does directory exist? Yes, there we are. So, but for something like screensaver, we have all these different things that we show, like, hey, these are the different settings and stuff like that, and then we also show what our Chef recipe is applying to the machine. So this is my first time going through the audit. I may find out that was a horrible idea and they don't like that answer at all. So I can't quite answer it as in depth, but really the whole idea is like, we're gonna show them the results of the InSpec test, which Right now, I'm really just kind of messing around with the current version of InSpec because we're not running InSpec 3, which gives you the multiple formatters. So I'm right now, my base idea is to spit out the InSpec, do a little bit of sed to replace and put some information in there that's pretty handy and spit it out and do an HTML page. So you have the the green check marks and everything looks nice when it's really green. If there's a lot of red and not so much. But also I'll come back to that point at the end. So that's one thing, and then we're putting that in a storage area where they can, if they want to look for this serial number, they got that information, and these are all the InSpec tests that have run. And the idea would be that we'd be running these kind of more often. So we'd have like a history of data on this particular machine, like, hey, it's been passing all these checks since June, and then these are the changes that maybe that the recipe has had, but these are the things that we're hardening on this machine, and this is how we're going about doing it. Also, to the coloring there, when a chef test when InSpec test fails on the endpoint, when the user clicks the button, it spits out a report on the desktop in HTML, and they double click that, and it opens up either in Chrome or Safari, and they can see what they particularly missed. 4 minutes now.
I had 2 questions, but I will limit it to one.
Excellent.
Ryan, so you're using InSpec to do audit checks and just compliance checks. I'm pretty sure that my security team would absolutely never let me turn SSH on our endpoints. Is that something that you have somehow convinced them to let you do, or did you find another way around?
So prior to me starting, we're kind of still in the process. Our Mac endpoints are managed with Jamf, and if you know anything about Jamf, Jamf likes to use, I think it's called Recon, and Recon needs SSH to run. So someone managed to convince security that that was a good idea prior to my starting, and then when I started, I was like, hey, that's a horrible idea. We can still live SSH on, but let's change the SSHD config to that it only allows keys, because we're not so much SSHing into the endpoints. We're more so for like our Zoom rooms or Zoom displays. Those are the kind of things we need to fix. And let me restate your question. Did I convince security to allow SSH? The answer was no. I just massaged it.
Do you have desktops as well as laptops? And do you identify the difference and run different tests and checks? And are there different challenges with desktops versus laptops?
You want to answer that, Mike, or we? Okay, so we at Slack, the vast majority of everyone has a laptop. We do have a couple desktops. There are different things that we manage in terms of like power management and different things like that. But encryption is, there's a kind of a real core set of every machine must have this in order to like operate. The challenge there, it's the nice thing about a desktop is it never moves, and for the most part, it's always on the network. So our desktops tend to be a lot more less prone to configuration drift than say maybe our laptops will be.
Ditto. We have Mac, Windows, Linux of every type, but desktops are easy compared to laptops.
I would really like it if everyone had a desktop, or it was a lab environment.
Or if
Those
they're
are those
all
are
in a
great.
pretty row with lights.
Yes.
So kind of to expand on that as well as, so how do you manage clients that are internet based? So, and I'm guessing that's kind of where you guys are headed with that.
Yeah. Okay. I think this is actually time-wise, this might be our last question. If you have any more questions, definitely come find any of us. Also, if anybody wants these Slack stickers, I somehow managed them to give me about 250 of them. So I don't want to go home with 250 stickers. Question there about, I forgot.
Manage your
already.
remote clients. Yeah.
Internet-based clients, so remote-based clients. So the tricky thing with them is bootstrapping. That's the biggest challenge that I've had to face. But most, if not all, of our remote clients come back onto campus. So the way we work it is that you can only bootstrap if you're on campus because you have access to our validation PEM, and if for some reason your node exists already on the server, we pull down another PEM to delete the machine kind of automatically, all the things like that. But as far as our chef runs go, we kind of treat it as a Beyond Corpse type setting, to where once you're managed with the chef server, there's a layer of security that we have in there that we can make sure that everything's good and golden.
This comes back a little bit to what I was describing earlier too, with where at a minimum, like if the client fails at some point, the minimum it's going to do is do a chef run the next time you log on, right? So we put down 2 plists that run, one every time, every 30 minutes, another one sort of lazily as you reboot or whatever else. So the whole model has a bunch of redundancy built into it. So we assume that you're a client milling around on the internet someplace out of our control, and we want to make sure that we can sort of corral you to a reasonable extent.
So I this many of you in one room, I've got to ask. If you wouldn't mind saying, how many of you are like official Apple self-servicing customers? One sheepish person? If you're not sure, you're not. And the other question is, how many of you are actually using DEP to deploy Macs? One? Two? You don't count. No, there is somebody behind you that does, though, so that's good. Excellent. Okay, great. I just wanted to ask. Can we have a nice round of applause for our excellent speakers?